Welcome back, everyone. We're diving deep into emotional intelligence today.
EI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
We've got some great excerpts from Daniel Goleman's book, Emotional Intelligence.
Classic.
Really a foundational book in this whole field, right?
Mhm.
And we want to go beyond just the hype,
Mhm. Mhm.
really get into how EI plays out in the real world, how it actually works.
Absolutely. And I think one of the most interesting things about EI is that it's not about just being nice all the time.
Okay, so there's more to it than just being agreeable.
Yeah, exactly. It's really a set of skills.
Mm.
And, in some areas, these skills can actually be more useful than, let's say, your IQ.
More useful than IQ.
Yeah.
So you're saying it's not just about, like, book smarts?
No, not at all. Think about those soft skills,
Skills.
Yeah,
Like-
like how you handle relationships, how you deal with conflict,
Hmm.
how you motivate yourself, how you motivate others.
So it's almost like street smarts for your emotions.
I like that. That's a
Okay.
good way to put it.
Yeah.
And Gorman actually illustrates this with a really great story about a bus driver in New York City.
Oh, I love a good anecdote. Let's hear it.
Yeah, so imagine like a sweltering summer day.
Ugh, I can feel it already.
You're on a crowded bus.
Everyone packed in like sardines.
Exactly. And everyone is just grumpy and irritable.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
But this bus driver, he was cheerful, he was upbeat,
Wow.
and by the end of the ride, he actually had the whole bus smiling.
He transformed the entire mood just with his attitude.
It's really impressive, right?
That's incredible. So he wasn't just driving a bus. He was like shaping the emotional environment.
Exactly. And that's the power of EI in action.
Makes you think, what if we all had a bit more of that?
Right.
Okay, so I'm starting to see how this could be beneficial.
Mm-hmm.
But how do we actually break down this idea of EI?
Well, Goleman outlines 5 key domains of emotional intelligence.
5? Okay.
And it all starts with self-awareness.
Self-awareness, so understanding your own emotions.
Right. Because if you don't know what you're feeling, how can you possibly manage it?
Makes sense, like trying to navigate without a map almost.
Yeah, that's a good analogy.
Yeah.
And that leads us to the next domain, which is self-regulation.
Self-regulation, so once you know what you're feeling, then you can, control it?
Yeah, you can learn to manage those emotions effectively.
So like instead of blowing up at a coworker when they miss a deadline, you take a breath and address it calmly.
Exactly. Self-regulation is all about keeping those emotional impulses in check.
Okay, makes sense.
And then we have motivation.
Motivation.
This is more than just willpower, It's about using your emotions as fuel to actually achieve your goals.
So if you're really passionate about a project, that excitement keeps you going.
That's it. It helps you push through the obstacles.
I like that.
But EI isn't just about us, right? It's also about understanding others.
Right, of course. So that's where empathy comes in.
Exactly.
Empathy, so putting yourself in someone else's shoes, right?
It's about being able to sense and understand what other people are feeling.
Sounds pretty crucial for, well, just about any relationship.
It really is. And, Goleman even talks about some research with monkeys.
Monkeys?
Yeah. They actually showed empathy in action, helping each other avoid electric shocks, even when they could only communicate through a screen.
Wow. Animals displaying empathy. That's fascinating.
It really highlights how deep-rooted this capacity is.
Yeah.
And finally, we have social skills.
The 5th domain, social skills.
This is kind of the glue that holds everything together.
So like communication, collaboration, conflict resolution, that sort of thing.
Exactly. It's about navigating social situations effectively.
And building those healthy relationships.
Right.
Okay, so we've got these 5 domains of EI.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm curious, what happens when things go wrong?
When things go wrong.
Yeah, when our emotions kind of get the better of us.
That's when things get really interesting.
Oh, boy.
Have you ever heard of the term neural hijacking?
Neural hijacking, yeah, I've heard the term.
But not sure what it means.
Not entirely, no.
Well, it's basically when your emotional brain kind of takes over and rational thinking goes out the window.
Oh, I can see where that would be a problem.
Right. So imagine you're in, let's say, a really stressful situation like a job interview.
Oh, I hate job interviews.
And you completely freeze up.
Oh, yeah. Been there. Mind goes blank. Sweating. Can't even remember my own name.
That's neural hijacking in action. It's your amygdala, part of your emotional brain.
The amygdala.
It gets triggered and floods your system with stress hormones.
So it's literally like our emotions are hijacking our ability to think straight.
That's a good way to put it.
Okay, wow, that sounds intense.
It can be, but the good news is understanding this process can help us manage it.
Manage it.
And that's where the 5 domains of EI come in.
So they're like tools for navigating those emotional storms.
Exactly. Self-awareness helps you recognize when it's happening. Self-regulation helps you get back in control.
Right, it all starts to connect now.
And remember, it's not about suppressing emotions, it's about learning to work with them.
Working with them, okay.
But before we get into all that, I think we should take a closer look at empathy.
Yeah, I'm ready to hear more about that.
So empathy, right. It's more than just recognizing how someone feels.
Okay, so it's deeper than that.
Yeah, it's also about understanding the why behind those emotions.
So like really connecting with them on another level.
Exactly. And that deeper understanding can really change the way we interact with people.
I can see that.
You know, Goleman talks about how destructive criticism often stems from a lack of empathy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Like when we don't consider the other person's perspective, we can easily lash out.
Right, we become too critical.
Yeah, he uses this example of a couple, let's say Sarah and David.
Okay, Sarah, David.
And David criticizes Sarah about something small, like how she loaded the dishwasher.
Oh, I've been there.
And immediately, Sarah feels attacked.
He's always criticizing me.
Right. He thinks I do everything wrong.
And meanwhile, David's probably thinking, it's just the dishwasher. Why is she so upset?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those automatic thought patterns, innocent victim for Sarah and righteous indignation for David,
Right.
well, they just fuel a cycle of conflict.
So they're both digging in their heels and no one's really listening.
Exactly. But what if, instead of jumping to those defensive thoughts, they tried to understand each other's perspective?
Yeah, that makes sense.
So David could consider that maybe Sarah had a stressful day, right?
Right.
And she's just feeling overwhelmed.
Yeah.
And Sarah could try to see that David might just be trying to be helpful, even if it didn't come out right.
So it's about taking a pause before reacting.
That pause is so important. And it's something we can get better at with practice.
So empathy is like a tool to navigate conflict.
Absolutely. And this goes beyond romantic relationships, too.
Oh, of course, yeah.
It's in workplaces, families, friendships.
Makes you think about all those times things could have gone differently with a bit more empathy.
Right. And on the flip side, when we feel heard and understood, it creates that sense of safety and connection.
That's powerful.
And that's where the power of emotional support comes in.
Oh, interesting. What does Goleman say about that?
He highlights how important it is for our well-being.
Okay.
Talking about our troubles isn't just venting, it's actually good for us.
Really?
He talks about this research by James Pennebaker,
Okay.
who found that writing about traumatic experiences actually improved people's health.
So putting our feelings into words can physically impact us.
It can. It's like releasing pent-up energy.
Wow.
And he also mentions a Stanford study about women with breast cancer.
Okay.
The ones who participated in support groups, they lived twice as long as those who didn't.
Twice as long. That's incredible.
It shows how powerful human connection is, especially during tough times.
Especially during those times, yeah.
And it makes you wonder if it's that powerful for adults.
What about for kids?
Imagine the impact on children.
That's a great point. We often forget how much they're absorbing.
Right. Goleman argues that teaching EI skills early on is crucial.
Early on, so like in school.
You know, like integrating emotional literacy into the curriculum.
So alongside math and reading, they're learning about empathy and self-awareness.
Exactly. Giving them the tools to understand their emotions.
I like that.
He gives examples like using a feelings cube in early grades.
A feelings cube. What's that?
It helps kids identify and express their emotions.
Wow, that's cool.
And as they get older, they can learn conflict resolution through role-playing.
Role-playing, yeah.
Or read stories that spark discussions about different emotions.
So it's about creating a space where it's okay to talk about feelings.
That's it. And learning healthy ways to manage them.
Not just preventing problems, but helping them thrive.
Exactly. But, you know, Goleman also acknowledges that it's not all about nurture.
Right. Our genes play a role, too.
He does. He talks about these two boys, Tom and Ralph, who had very different temperaments from infancy.
Oh, that's interesting.
Tom was more cautious and shy, while Ralph was bold and outgoing.
So different personalities right from the start.
Yeah, and as they grew up, Tom struggled with anxiety in social situations.
Even though he was intelligent.
Right. And Ralph, on the other hand, thrived in social settings.
So their nature shaped their experiences.
It did. And this brings up a big question.
What's that?
Can we actually change our emotional intelligence?
Even if we weren't born with certain tendencies.
Yeah, can we learn to be more empathetic or better at managing anger?
If it doesn't come naturally.
That's what researchers are trying to figure out.
It's a fascinating question.
And while genes provide a starting point, there's growing evidence that we can improve our EI through practice.
So it's not fixed. We can actually grow and evolve.
Exactly. That's pretty empowering, right?
It is. So we're not stuck with whatever emotional patterns we have.
Right.
That's a really hopeful message.
It is. But how do we actually develop those EI muscles?
That's the big question. So how do we actually get better at this whole EI thing?
How do we get better?
Yeah, are there specific exercises or practices we can try?
You know, there are a lot of approaches out there.
Oh.
One that Goleman highlights is mindfulness.
Mindfulness.
Yeah, have you heard of that?
I have, but I always thought of it as more for like relaxation or stress reduction.
Oh, it's definitely great for that.
Yeah.
But it's also really powerful for building self-awareness.
Self-awareness.
Because when you practice mindfulness, you start noticing those subtle emotional shifts throughout the day.
So you're more in tune with how you're feeling.
Exactly. And instead of being like swept away by a wave of anger
Right.
or anxiety, you can catch it early on.
And maybe choose a different response.
Exactly. It gives you that space to respond instead of just react.
That makes a lot of sense.
And then there are also specific communication techniques that can really boost your EI.
Like what?
Things like active listening, using I statements to express your feelings, learning to give and receive feedback constructively.
So building that healthy communication toolkit.
Exactly.
But thinking back to what we talked about with emotional contagion, if our emotions can spread from person to person,
Right.
doesn't that add another layer of complexity?
It definitely does. And Goleman tells this really incredible story
Oh.
about a platoon of American soldiers during the Vietnam War.
During the war, wow.
They're in the middle of a firefight, and they see this line of Buddhist monks
Buddhist monks
walking calmly towards them,
walking towards them.
right through the line of fire.
Wow, that's chilling. What happened?
The soldiers were completely taken aback
I can imagine.
by the monks' serenity in the face of such danger.
Yeah.
And something shifted for them. Their fear and aggression just seemed to melt away.
Melt away.
And it was replaced by this sense of awe and peace.
It's like the monk's calmness was contagious.
It really was. And, you know, maybe we don't encounter those dramatic situations in our daily lives,
Right, thankfully.
but we experience emotional contagion all the time.
All the time, yeah.
Think about how someone's bad mood can bring down a whole room.
Or how a really inspiring leader can energize everyone around them.
Exactly. So if we're more aware of our own emotional states,
Who can be more responsible for the energy we bring to others?
that's it.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today.
We have.
From those 5 domains of EI to the importance of empathy, the dangers of destructive criticism, the power of emotional support, even neural hijacking. It's clear that emotional intelligence is incredibly important,
It really is.
and it affects so many aspects of our lives.
Absolutely. And the journey of developing it, it's ongoing.
Yeah, I can see that.
It's about continuous learning and growth.
Before we wrap up, I'm curious, if you could choose one area of your own emotional intelligence to work on, what would it be?
Ooh, that's a good question.
Yeah.
I think for me, it would be continuing to work on my ability to stay grounded.
Grounded.
Yeah, like centered in the face of challenges.
Okay. I want to be more resilient and adaptable when things get tough.
That's a great goal. What about you?
I think I'd focus on deepening my empathy skills.
Empathy.
Yeah, I want to be more present and understanding with others.
Especially when it's hard.
Exactly.
Those are both great aspirations. And
Yes.
the great thing is, with EI, we can all keep learning and growing in these areas.
Absolutely. So, to all our listeners out there, we encourage you to check out Daniel Goleman's book if you want to learn more.
It's a fantastic resource.
Yeah, full of insights and practical advice.
And remember, this journey of emotional intelligence, it's a personal one.
Very personal.
It's about discovering what works for you and making those small, consistent efforts to cultivate greater self-awareness, empathy.
And skillful communication.
Right.
Well, thanks for joining us on this deep dive into emotional intelligence.
It was a pleasure.
We hope you learned something new and feel inspired to keep exploring this fascinating world.